So over at Ars Technica today, they answered a question that had been bugging me, and it was one of those questions that I didn't even know was really bugging me. There was just something kind of sticking in my brain about this. Artemis 1, the first test flight of the SLS and the Orion capsule for our return trip to the moon here with the Artemis program. It's supposed to come back safely. Splash down off the coast of California, be recovered if all goes well. And so far, everything is going well. This has been about as perfect an unmanned mission as anybody could have hoped for. Everything is just working perfectly, and knock on wood, it'll keep working perfectly. So why, after this brilliant test flight, is it going to be at least 2 years before Artemis 2 flies? You would think, hey, they know how to stack the rocket. They know how everything works. Why don't we just get that thing on the launch pad, get those astronauts up in there, and make this next manned, the first manned test flight? Well, the reason is about 8-9 years ago, there was a $100 million hole in NASA's budget, and they figured out a way to plug that hole. They're going to reuse 8 black boxes, the avionics, from Artemis 1 in Artemis 2.
Oh, my God.
And it'll take them that long to get the parts out and plugged into the other?
It's going to take them approximately 27 months to...
Kill it with fire. Kill it with fire.
To remove, refurbish, and install these 8 black boxes from Artemis 1 to Artemis 2. Bill, have you do you read the comments on the space stuff at Ars Technica at all?
No.
There's something brilliant. It's called a Wick event, because you said burn it with fire. A couple of years ago, there was a commenter to ours named Wick who said that what he would really like to see happen with the first SLS launch is for the whole thing to explode spectacularly, close enough to the launch pad to just clear out all the infrastructure, but without hurting anybody in the launch crew, and just clear it out so they've got to start from scratch. And since then, it's been that idea has been called a Wick event.
I could not agree more. I was calling for that before that launch too. When the thing launched, I was disappointed. And the reason I was disappointed is because that meant we're going to throw more money down this garbage hole of 50-year-old technology. And what you've just said is so shocking that I can only believe it because NASA's doing it. It is. So what is that? Well, there's a couple things in here. First of all, au contraire, the mission in terms of Orion has gone pretty well, but the CubeSats there've been some really cool CubeSats, and the coolest 4 or 5 of them have failed completely. For example, this is NASA management at work now, our current NASA. So there's a couple of these CubeSats that are battery powered, and they deploy their solar cells and so on.
These came off of Orion, or where did these come from, Bill?
Yes, they came off of Orion in lunar orbit. They're basically hitching a ride. They're not part of the They're not part of the mission in terms of the moon mission, but they're hitching a ride. We're going to the moon. Might as well take them with us. They're tiny. One of them was a plasma drive experiment. One of them was a very slow descent to the moon's surface rather than like a lot of thrust at the end. One of them was a solar sail. It was going to deploy the first solar sail. They've all failed. They're dead. And we know for a certain fact that on one of them, probably 2 of them, and maybe 3 of them, the reason that one of them died is because the battery died. And the reason the battery died is because of the hurricane. The launch of SLS was delayed by several days, and the batteries in these CubeSats continued to run. And apparently, no one thought to either charge the batteries or
switch them off,
or what?
They might not have been able to even reach them once they were installed, because it's a disposable rocket, and so serviceability has never been a part of its design.
Okay, so all right, that's fine. That's fine.
Not really.
But what I'm saying is that is a design flaw, right? And the design flaw really isn't even the fact that they let these batteries run down. The design flaw is that the system is it's not even unreliable, it's infrequent. So let's say they can get it done in 2 years, which means 4. And let's say they can do that. Does that mean that Artemis 2 is going to be a manned mission? Is it going to be crewed?
I think because 3 is the crew mission, right?
Okay, so there's another 2 years to get the black boxes out of Artemis 2 into Artemis 3.
After this, the recycle thing is only the one between Artemis 1 and 2. They don't have to keep doing this.
So there's a pilot expression that says never fly the A model of anything.
That's right.
And that is a profoundly good piece of advice. The test bed is where you learn things, and then it's it's the C model or the G model where they really get it right. So the reason that I would have a high degree of confidence in flying on SpaceX is because SpaceX has exploded a ton of rockets. They've exploded a ton of rockets. And every time they explode a rocket, they learn something new about that system. And they don't make that mistake again. SLS has flown one mission. And God knows how many demons are built into that system that we won't know about until we fly it a bunch of times. And you could not get me on that vehicle, which looks like it's constructed by apes, by the way, compared to the Dragon capsule with all the external wires that look like they've been stapled on.
Saturn V, which flew for the first time in '67, before I was born.
I can't help but think that if SpaceX had been running this mission, that Artemis 2 would have passed Artemis 1 as it returned from the moon, and Artemis 2 would have been headed for the moon.
That's exactly what I think too.
Yeah.
So here's what's interesting to me about SpaceX, right? SpaceX is so far ahead of the game. They're a generation ahead of the game. And I mean, they're like 20 years ahead of the competition, the closest competition. And my only concern about SpaceX is they're so far ahead of the pack that they don't have any competition. And I like competition. Yeah. So what they ought to do is they ought to take whatever money is allocated to this 1970s design of Artemis dinosaur, and they ought to set up, and Burt Rutan told me about the real power of this, a number of prizes. Because if you set up a $20 million prize or a $30 million prize, that's nothing compared to NASA's budget.
Oh, yeah.
Then you will be able to attract private equity into your program in order to get the prize. And what we really need is we need another company or two or three to get the initial startup capital, as long as they are being absolutely bold, like just really, really, really thinking outside the box. Because SpaceX could use some competition, and innovation is everywhere. Everything about Artemis is wrong. Everything about it is wrong. The administration is wrong, the cost is wrong, the design is wrong, the reliability is wrong, the test flying is wrong. This business about having to take electronics out of one obsolete spacecraft and put them into another obsolete spacecraft is wrong. Everything about it is wrong. Give me something new and then put some money behind those people. You don't have to give them billions of dollars. Just say, hey, if you're the first person to land on the moon, you get $100 million. I don't even mean a manned mission. I'm saying you put a man-capable lander on the moon, unmanned, $100 million, $200 million, whatever.
Somebody's going to do it. By the way,
I actually saw something that I liked from Blue Origin in this past week or so. And even the Shatner launch was not impressive to me on the Blue Origin craft. However, they did something smart finally. They took one of the guys from Dude Perfect.
Yes, they did.
And we got the best views that I have seen of what it's like to fly in that capsule. The guy from Dude Perfect had a GoPro camera strapped to his hand, and you saw his reaction going up and coming down. You saw the release moment when they could unbuckle their seatbelts and float around the cabin and flip over. You saw the view out the window where the curvature of the Earth was visible. You saw it all, and I thought,
4K, 60 frames per second, right?
What's that?
I said, sorry, 4K at 60 frames per second.
Oh, yeah, sharp as a tack.
Because these guys make videos for a living. That's what they do.
So for the uninitiated, the Dude Perfect guys, which you must now go and watch, but Dude Perfect does all these kind of crazy stunts with, trying to throw a basketball off of the Eiffel Tower or something into a trash can. I mean, they do all these kind of zany things. Well, they had a competition, and the winner of the competition among the guys in Dude Perfect got to go on the spaceship. And I think there was a third-party sponsor. The mission was called Titanium Feather, and I think there's this agency that is trying to fund civilian travel to space, and this was like their first demonstration of how they wanted to do that. In any case, the Dude Perfect kid was hilarious. It was sharp video. You got to see the inside of the capsule, which I hadn't even seen during one of the missions yet. It was, all the way up and all the way down. And then you saw the other guys from Dude Perfect on the ground marveling at what was going on, and talking about it. And the whole thing was so engaging in a way that no previous Blue Origin mission has been.
I give Blue Origin hell because they still haven't launched a gram into orbit. Not a single gram have they put into orbit. They're just rerunning Alan Shepard's Mercury flight from 1962. It gets a little old after a while. If they're a launch company, they got to get stuff into orbit one of these days. But they're not quite recreating Alan Shepard's Mercury flight because, he was like this in a tin can, and they've practically got a living room up there for 5 or 6 people. It was
pretty spacious.
It's different. Yeah.
And here's the thing for our viewers about Dude Perfect, by the way. There's no obscene language. There's no F-bombs. These are openly Christian guys. A good YouTube station can reliably get 1 million views per video, or 10 million maybe. Dude Perfect consistently gets 100 million views. Wow. And I have nothing but the highest respect for those guys. They do interesting things. They do manly things. They do it with a sense of humor, and it's beautifully produced, beautifully edited, beautifully shot. And they're just good guys. They're just good men. The fact that they've got the kind of subscription base that they've got is one of the indicators of how healthy our society is or isn't. I just can't say enough about them.
They're reinforce
fantastic
that, Bill, my first recollection of having heard of Dude Perfect was we were in church, and my youngest son was with us, and they do that part in the service where they say, turn around and shake hands with the person next to you. Anyway, so we did the little handshake thing, and then my son leaned over and whispered to me, and he said, that's the guy from Dude Perfect. And I said, what?
How cool is that?
And I think he may have texted me a video and said, that's the guy from Dude Perfect. So one of the guys from Dude Perfect was sitting in front of us at church. And I was like, oh, really? There's a guy who's really popular on the internet and yet is here, singing praises to Jesus? Is that can be done?
And the same is true for Smarter Every Day, which is another great channel.
Well, that's a good channel too.
By a good man, he's not pumping his religion on anybody, but it's in his closing credits. It's clean. It's interesting. It's really interesting. It's well made, and it's cool, and it's getting a big audience.
But anyway, Dustin, my point of bringing up the Dude Perfect guy was that even Blue Origin's relatively puny efforts, in contrast with SpaceX, to me were more impressive than the long, drawn-out, badly produced production of the SLS launch, and it's just like, ugh. Come on, can't they get somebody? There's not a single, one of their Hollywood buddies who can come in there and show them how to produce this thing?
Even the Artemis graphics and photographs are appalling. Everybody's seeing these stunning pictures from the back, and I don't find them stunning at all. I do remember the first time the video camera came on, it was like a white cardboard cutout of the Artemis because the thing was 30 stops overexposed. Yeah. But the thing about Dude Perfect is they're experts, right? You would send on a mission. You might want to send a guy who's an engineering expert, a thermodynamics expert. These people are video production experts. That's their job. That's what they do. They know how to make videos interesting. That means multiple cameras. It means editing. It means music. It means reaction shots, pacing, all that stuff. So yes, SpaceX could use some Dude Perfect, or me. I could go. I know how to do that.
Yeah,
I could go.
Hell yeah. I'll wrap with this, I guess. Apollo first flew in Apollo 4 in November of 1967. It was an unmanned test flight, much like Artemis 1. Didn't go as far, but our space program was much younger then. It was just a few years old. Saturn last flew the last Apollo mission in December of 1972. So just 5 years and 1 month later was the entire Apollo program, from the first test flight of the Saturn V to the last manned mission to the moon. And
of 6.
Pardon?
6 missions to the moon, planned for 7, but 13 didn't get there.
And
that alone was an indication.
So the entire Apollo program, from the first unmanned flight of the Saturn V in 1967 until the last manned mission to the moon, Apollo 17, lasted 5 years and 1 month. And that included a 2-year pause in manned spaceflight after we lost those 3 fine men in the Apollo 1 launch pad fire. We probably could have done it in 3.
We probably could have. The Mark I Apollo capsule was a death trap, and Gus Grissom, one of the 3 men that died in that, brought a lemon from home, from his lemon tree in Florida, brought it home, hung it on a clothes hanger, and put it on top of the Apollo 1 capsule simulator. When they took delivery of the original Apollo capsule, there were something like 575 squawks, 575 specific known items that needed work before they even got their hands on it. But the Saturn V, was it 12 launches, 13 total? One of those 2. Most powerful rocket ever made. Anyone who ever rode on a Saturn V died of old age.
Already, and this was without any further delays, Artemis is going to take longer to get footprints back on the moon than the entire Apollo program lasted. I don't know what's happened in NASA. Maybe it's us. Maybe we're not pushing them hard enough. Maybe there's no existential space threat like the Soviets anymore, and that's what's slowing us down. But what I do know is we've got a huge future in space. It's just not called Artemis.